Welcome to the Liberty Lobbyist, where we teach you political lessons from the purple state of New Hampshire so that you can advocate for liberty no matter where you live. I am Melissa Blasek. I am a former New Hampshire state representative and the current executive director and lobbyist for a grassroots liberty organization called Rebuild NH. Listen, I feel the need to give my little evaluation of what is currently going on down in DC, and I promise that I will link back. I will circle back to the primary mission of the Liberty Lobbyist. I promise that I will. But I'm gonna kind of give my little breakthrough because everyone's giving their analysis, and I want to give my analysis, but also to point out about why we need to be getting to work. I promise I'm going to get there. Before we do, I just want to give a couple of notes from our sponsors. Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain or stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a plump, hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Discover Native Path Collagen, made of only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers, the two most important types that make up 90% of the cartilage in your collagen in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut without the need for unnecessary fillers. Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety, which is very important to me. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything: coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. I'm not much of a protein shake or smoothie, but I love a protein coffee every morning thanks to collagen. Its peptide formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed more easily and mixes perfectly without clumping. Right now, when you visit getnativepath.com/dailyclout, you can stock up on Native Path Collagen for an incredible 45% off today, plus free shipping. Every order comes with a 365-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free. Attention parents, I've got an early Christmas gift for you. We've all been there. 1 minute your kiddo is bouncing off the walls, an hour later they're super sick and you feel helpless, and it can turn your plans upside down, especially on vacation. After thousands of customer requests, the wellness company has just launched the Kids Medical Emergency Kit. You no longer have to deal with emergency illnesses in a panic mode. Now you have 6 critical medications at your fingertips to treat 20+ illnesses for issues like strep throat, ear infections, lice, and respiratory illnesses, and avoiding urgent cares in hospitals. The Kids Emergency Kit has been hand-selected by the wellness company's medical board and includes chewable amoxicillin, dissolvable ivermectin, and an optional EpiPen, and more. This includes a detailed guidebook guiding you step-by-step in emergencies. Ordering this kit is simple. Parents can order this for their children, fill out an intake form, and you get a verification call for consent, and then it's delivered to your door. Don't wait until you're in the middle of a crisis and avoid late-night urgent care runs. Order your Kids Emergency Kit today and remove panic from your life. And if 1 or 2 of the scripts runs out, there's a replenishment option to restock only what you need. Go to dailyclouthealth.com and grab your Kids Emergency Kit right now. Use code Melissa to save $40 at checkout. These kits are only available in the USA. All right, I want to start with the good things. And I swear, I am not trying to throw cold water, on anything. I am often accused of either being a Pollyanna or of being a nihilist. And I swear I am neither. I just try to call it as I see it. And sometimes it ain't great, and sometimes it is. Good cabinet picks. Oh, and by the way, I want to start off by saying, I know that Trump's been out there. He's got a lot of campaign promises. He's got these videos floating around. And obviously every politician makes, campaign promises that they don't have any intention of following through on. That's just normal par for the course stuff. But these videos have been floating around. I'll believe it when I see it. He did a lot of this in 2016 too, throwing out big talk and marketing it up so that his base actually thought he did it, even if he didn't do it. And he's very good at this. And my Republican friends are salivating over some of these videos. I would take it with a grain of salt. Let's look at what's actually happening and analyze that, and not these marketing videos. So Pete Hegseth. I think this is a great choice. I think this is a MAGA choice. It's out of the box. I think he's being unfairly maligned by the media as just a Fox News host. That's not, I mean, he has a big military background. It is true that he is not part of, the military industrial complex, but isn't that a good thing? Isn't that what, if you want a disruptor, if you want somebody to go in there and break stuff and tear it apart and drain out the woke toxicity in the military, I think that he's your guy. I think it was a great choice. Elise Stefanik, listen, I know like my libertarian friends freaked out when she was made UN. Elise Stefanik is a great example of people who were just total rhinos in Congress. I mean, Elise Stefanik has an F rating, a liberty rating, okay? She is neither a fiscal nor a social conservative by any stretch of the imagination. And people kind of didn't like her until she realized that she could reinvent herself as MAGA. And so she sucked up to Trump. And then she started throwing some based quotes out during hearings to use as sound bites. And that's all it takes to be MAGA now, okay? So I prefer her to leave Congress. All right. And I know people, some of my libertarian friends got very upset. Oh, she's got to go to the UN. Folks, the UN is a made up organization where people sit in a room and they vote on made up things. It is completely irrelevant and inconsequential. And it is the perfect place to put Elise Stefanik and get her out of Congress and hopefully out of what she's been really doing behind the scenes, which is recruiting bad candidates for Congress. Doug Burgum, another case of putting somebody who is not good in a better place. I had heard he was going to get energy. The man is a green energy grifter. There is not a green energy grift that he does not buy into. Okay. So Secretary of the Interior, it's definitely a better place for him than energy. So I have no problem. There was no scenario of avoiding Doug Burgum for the cabinet altogether. I mean, I have it on pretty good authority that he was the vice presidential pick until Trump got shot. And then he didn't think that he needed Doug Burgum and he could throw the base of bone and give them Vance. But then you got to put Doug Burgum someplace else. And I think that this is a less damaging place. I think it's fine. Lee Zeldin, EPA, I think that's good. Obviously, the biggest, disruptor choice is RFK Jr. I have super mixed feelings because I was so happy, and yet he was actually not my first choice. And yet it's a sign that things could happen. Again, I have very mixed feelings. The best piece of news that I have heard out of him possibly being, assuming he gets confirmed, and I actually think he will get confirmed because I think that he will throw out very good people that are not like totally counterculture, that will help him get confirmed actually, is he has thrown out the name of Dr. Jay Bhattacharya for head of the NIH. When I heard that, I almost cried. He is so the perfect person to head the NIH. It's not even funny. First of all, not only is he wildly qualified to head the NIH, he, of course, when he came out with the Great Barrington Declaration, FOIA emails showed that Francis Collins, the former head of the NIH, had written about him that he was a, quote, fringe epidemiologist that needed a takedown. So this is the ultimate vindication, middle finger, irony, whatever you want to call it. And he so deserves it. And not to name drop or whatever, but he's been such a great help here in New Hampshire. And he's a wonderful person. And he would be revolutionary heading the NIH and getting through and changing and reforming these perverse grant incentive structures. Perfect person. I just love that. And I think it's possible we get a bunch of other really good people in different roles because of RFK. And I would be absolutely thrilled with that. And I will tell you my issues with him when I get there a little bit later. All right, bad. Bad. Matt Gaetz is a good vote in Congress, and I am not taking that away from him. He is a good vote in Congress. But there has been a tremendous amount of smoke around him as a person and potential, at least illicit, if not completely illegal, sexual activities. And I am certainly the type of person to believe, especially when it comes to politicians in DC, that where there is smoke, there is fire. And he is also a showboater. He loves to showboat, and it's not necessarily real. I mean, and he doesn't care if what he breaks while showboating just for himself, not for an end or a purpose, but just for himself. In other words, I don't like Matt Gaetz as a human being. Now, I don't like a lot of politicians as a human being, but I don't mind them being in control if they do the things that I want. But him as Attorney General of all people, when there is such smoke and fire, I don't seriously believe that Trump believes that he will be actually confirmed by the Senate. Now, I'm going to put on my tinfoil conspiracy hat. I have a theory that I have zero proof of. Okay, I'm just putting this out there. I believe that Donald Trump and Matt Gaetz have a deal where they know that he will not be confirmed, but by nominating him to be Attorney General, it gave him license to resign from the House just before this hearing. And then notice Speaker Johnson immediately came out and said, "Oh yeah, all this evidence that was going to come out, yeah, we're going to seal that. We're not going to bring that up." And I think that's so that Matt Gaetz can keep his powder dry and just kind of rest on his laurels for the next 2 years, so that then he can go and run for governor in Florida in 26 when Ron DeSantis is termed out, and with Trump's support backing. And that's what I think. To me, that makes perfect sense, because I do not believe that in a rational world, Donald Trump believes that Matt Gaetz can actually be confirmed. I just don't. Donald Trump is not he's not stupid at all. Kristi Noem is, I don't know. I don't have strong feelings about her. I don't know what it is that she knows about the border, but frankly, what qualifies a lot of these people to be cabinet choices? I don't know. I think this is going to be kind of a salacious, I'm not trying to be gossipy, but I have to tell you, the moment I heard about Kristi Noem, my first thought was, guess that relationship with Corey Lewandowski is working out for her. And Corey Lewandowski being one of Trump's top aides and confidants, and he is a New Hampshire guy, so I do know a little bit more about Corey Lewandowski and Kristi Noem than maybe other people do. But I just don't think she's going to be that great in this role. It also kind of messes up the governor race, because if she has to resign as governor, her lieutenant governor will take over, which will elevate him for the next election. And we actually, I guess, did have some good people lined up to run to take her spot. So, and lieutenant governor is not that awesome. Scott Bessent, there is not enough being made of Scott Bessent. Now, he has not officially been nominated to head the Fed, but he is the only name being thrown out there as heading the Fed. Go Google Scott Bessent, because he's a Soros guy. He worked for George Soros for like 20 years. He's a huge Keynesian economist. And I believe that the number one national security threat to the United States of America is the national debt. That's what I believe. I know I'm a little lit up about this, but again, I believe that the number one national security threat at the moment to the United States of America is the national debt. And I see absolutely nothing serious coming out of the Trump administration about taking on the debt and that threat and the economy and inflation, all of that. I see nothing serious. That is not a serious pick to pick Scott Bessent, who not only won't necessarily be able to reverse anything, who will do nothing but continue doing what has been done after Republicans went out and campaigned on the economy and inflation. That is criminal. And people need to be paying way more attention to who is going to head the Fed. speaking of the lack of seriousness around the economy, Republicans, Doge, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, I got to tell you, I think Vivek Ramaswamy, again, I'm getting real lit up here. I think he is one of the biggest frauds in politics I have ever seen. I call him the fake Ramaswampy or Pharmaswampy because he is a big pharma guy. And I cannot stand a fraud, but more than me not being able to stand a fraud, I cannot stand when Republicans use political theater to fool their base. I actually don't mind political theater. I think a good amount of political theater, if it's being used against your enemy to achieve an outcome, is very good. And maybe in the future on the show, we'll talk about how to correctly use political theater to your advantage in activism. But I'm sorry, this Doge thing is political theater to placate the Republican base, and I don't like it. I don't like it at all. This is a made-up agency with made-up jobs, and you know what they're going to do? They're going to have a website. I'm not making this up. Go Google it. They're going to make a website where they're going to have people vote like it's damn American Idol. They're going to vote on which line item is silliest, because apparently, laughing and memeing at how dumb the left is now solves the national debt. You know what they're going to do? They're going to take silly little pork line items that are like $500,000 that are for something dumb like Beagle studies, okay? And that's what they're going to put up, and they're going to laugh and be like, oh, we'll cut that. Good, you can cut all of that little stuff, but that ain't going to move the needle. That will not even make a dent. Oh, and then Vivek, the fake, announces that he's going to have a podcast, because, by the way, he can have a podcast because he doesn't actually have a real position in the administration. If you have a real cabinet position, you can't have a podcast, okay? But he doesn't have a real position. Oh, and by the way, I think he was never going to have anything real, ever. This is the perfect place for him. That fake will never put up or shut up and actually have to vote on anything and prove himself ever. He will always just be relegated to things where he can talk a big talk and never have to follow through and actually ever doing anything. All right. But I believe that, again, this is my other tinfoil conspiracy theory. I believe that he was going to have a different made up job. And then I think that Trump is a little bit mad at him. This is actually not a total conspiracy theory. I have actually heard this rumblings that Trump is not particularly happy with him because he's a little bit too much of a showboater, and he steps out of line a little bit too much and tries to take away a little bit too much spotlight from the real big guy. And so I believe that he got stuck in this fake role with Elon Musk, who is, a personality greater than life. He's a force greater than life. So he would have to be in Elon Musk's shadow. And I think that was his punishment. But that's just my theory. But anyway, Doge, there is a real department, not a made up department like Doge. Okay, but there is a real department whose job is to make recommendations for budgetary cuts. And they actually are not bad at their job. Like when Trump was president last time, they did the thing. They made those recommendations. And then Trump signed every single budgetary bill that not only did not cut a single one of those things, but increased spending on all fronts. So I am not seeing anything serious. And I am not saying that they can stop. I mean, the economy is going to go downhill. Okay. It's going to go downhill. And there's really we're at the station before the arrival destination of the economy just falling out. And it's actually why I've been concerned about Republicans winning this election, because they're the ones who are going to be caught holding the bag. They ran on the economy. They're the ones who are going to be caught holding the bag, because people don't understand. Economies are not light switches. A policy you enact now does not have an immediate result. Okay. It has a result in a couple years down the road. Now, and I'm also not absolving Republicans of responsibility for what has occurred, because Trump spent more money than every other president combined, even before the COVID spending. And then on top of that, whoa, baby, that is what created the inflation that we have now. Now you add that on top of what should be a natural recession already. Ooh, it's going to be tough. And what I don't see is fortitude out of any of these people to actually do what will need to be done. Going back to Vivek, he says he wants to have a podcast, right? I said that. On this podcast, he said it's going to be like the Manhattan Project of how to solve spending. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, man. Cutting spending is not a mystery. You don't need a Manhattan Project for it. What you need is political fortitude to do the thing that will be politically hard. Cuts that will actually make a dent to the national debt will be very, very politically hard and damaging. Do they have the guts? I have my doubts by a lot. But if they did, even more so to say that all we have is the next 2 years. Now, even without that, I say all we have is the next 2 years because the economy is going to go out. Republicans are going to be caught holding the bag. We only have and then that's just on top of the natural pendulum. I don't want to hear any more out of conservative pundits saying this is somehow a permanent majority. Again, I am not trying to throw cold water. He ran up the electoral college score and good for him. He did great things, but he barely won these swing states. If you actually go back and look at the numbers now that everything's been counted, he has barely won. This is not a permanent majority, folks. There will be a natural shift of the pendulum as there always is going into the midterms. Again, I'm building, but we have 2 years. I will come back to this. Maha, RFK, my concerns. Okay, I do believe that RFK often gets out ahead of his skis on issues. And I think that he is not as careful of a speaker as he should be. And that is very concerning to me because we don't get another shot at this. If we, and I mean we, as in those of us who are in the medical freedom movement, who now have our guy in the driver's seat, if he messes this up, we are a laughing stock and we will never be put in charge of anything ever again. He does need to be careful and he needs to watch his words more. And so I actually preferred somebody like a Joe Ladapo or a Jay Bhattacharya being in charge of HHS. But that's the other reason why I thought Bhattacharya being put in charge of the NIH was a great thing. Okay. But I am concerned about how uncareful he is when he speaks. And I am very concerned about this hyper focus on food. I understand that this was like a good campaign thing because it wasn't really that controversial. But and if we just had all the time in the world and like we didn't only have the next 2 years and you know we didn't have a whole lot of problems, we hadn't just lived through COVID where we saw that just utter and complete corruption of everything, I would say sure, you want to go out and fund some better nutritional interventional studies because frankly he goes out there and says this is poison, this is poison, this is poison, and those are all things I don't personally eat, but you can find just as many studies saying that they're great and actually even beneficial. Okay, because nutritional studies are ridiculous. So you want to, instead of funding like corrupt studies, you want to do some better studies? Sure, go for it. You want to then do some educational outreach to educate people about why things are good and why things are bad and how they could have a healthier lifestyle. I would say that's great too. But to me, that's a very low priority. I just think there are significantly bigger things that impact my life. I don't eat high fructose corn syrup. I don't eat food dyes. I don't need daddy government coming to save me. I do worry about RFK's sort of authoritarian tendencies, his big government tendencies. He is quite liberal on a lot of things. It's weird to me that he's going to head. But listen, the fact that RFK is heading HHS is not what MAGA fans think that it means. It does not in any way, shape, or form mean that Donald Trump has had some type of come to Jesus moment about these topics. That is not true. And the reason why I know it is not true is because just yesterday, Trump truth socialed, patting himself on the back for Operation Warp Speed and his entire COVID response. Again, he hasn't learned anything, okay? But what Trump really is transactional first and foremost. And I do believe that he is a man of his word. And so, listen, RFK rather, he ran the most consequential third-party campaign in history because he leveraged it And it's true. Trump would have lost. RFK wasn't going to get any kind of serious percentage points in any state, but it would have been just enough in every one of those swing states that was a coin flip, which was most of them. It would have been just enough to steal away from Trump, and Kamala Harris would have been the next president of the United States. So he leveraged his third-party run into something that is transformational, and I applaud him for that. I really do. I hope he focuses correctly. I hope he speaks correctly. I hope he puts the right people around him. I'm seeing some good signs of that, so I'm very happy for that. But I want him to remember also, we have 2 years. And I'm going to say this again. I am already hearing from Republican lawmakers, both in D.C. and in New Hampshire. Oh, well, we can't do too much, because then we won't win in 26. We have to just focus on winning again in 26. 26 is not guaranteed. It is not guaranteed. I've already articulated many reasons why we will probably lose in 26. I've said this before in the show. I'm going to say it again. Republicans have a habit of getting the majority and viewing it as a trophy that they put up on a shelf behind glass to look at and admire, while Democrats get the ball and they get it to the end zone as many times as humanly possible, so that even if they lose the next election, things have so fundamentally transformed that they cannot be fully outdone. Republicans need to stop just pretending that because there's more people right now wearing their jerseys in the room, that they don't actually have to play the game. And yes, I am very angry because I was hearing things just this afternoon out of New Hampshire about this. I do not want excuses. We have 2 years. Demand better out of your politicians and remind them that 26 is never guaranteed. You do it now. There was a mandate, supposedly. That's why you ran up the score. You do the thing. Elections are meaningless, completely and utterly meaningless, if you cannot achieve outcomes. We are outcome based on this show. I am ready to get to work. I can't wait for January to start detailing all of my adventures as we go through the very long 6-month legislative season in New Hampshire, and how my activism works. But that is my message right now. You go and you already start hounding your Republican lawmakers, both at the state and federal level. No excuses. 2 years is all we have. All right. Before I bring on our guest to talk about something that I actually believe has been really consequential that we've been working on in New Hampshire, that could be done all over the country and should be done all over the country. Just a couple more words from our sponsors. Birch Gold. For those of us holding our breath for the past several months, we can finally exhale. Work can finally be done on the major issues this country is facing. I hope so. That's, of course, what my message was just about. One of the most significant being our national debt. Also, my message. The fact is, our nation is broke, and that debt is a house of cards that can't be quickly dismantled. So the strategy remains the same. Diversify your savings. Yeah, don't trust them. I'm not seeing good things. That's why I buy gold from Birch Gold. So many things are out of our control, out of our president's control. It's important to have a safe haven for your savings. Birch Gold Group, my gold company, will help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. And the best news, it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. Text Daily Clout to 989898 to get your free info kit. Plus, right now through Black Friday, you receive a free 1-ounce silver eagle for every $5,000 purchased. Protect your savings with Birch Gold. Text Daily Clout to 989898 and claim your eligibility for free silver today. Welcome to the Liberty Lobbyist Representative Mike Belcher. Nice to see you.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
Yeah. So you are now going to be a second term state rep here in New Hampshire. Tell us a bit about how you became a state rep and got into politics and all of that before we get going on the other stuff.
Okay. It's been a long trip to figure out how to get here. I've always been politically oriented. Most of my life, I was on the other side. I grew up on the hard left. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
It wasn't until, through my latter 20s and then early 30s and on that I started to realize I got some very important things wrong. Needed to make some changes, started tearing into my political understanding and just my understanding of everything that I thought, because I mean, the thing about the left is it's not that they don't know anything, it's that they know so much that isn't true. So you start reinvestigating history, you start reinvestigating what actually happened, what is real. And I found myself writing about political philosophy and philosophy in general and all sorts of other stuff. And that earned me a little bit of an audience with people who were on the right and the sort of people who actually like to get stuff done, unlike some people. I had a number of people asking me to consider running. So I did. A seat opened up, a seat that, in theory anyway, it was redistricted, but in theory, the seat used to belong to Bill. No, it's not Bill. What's his name there? The gentleman who was just lost in his Senate race, who was
Marsh?
a Republican. Yeah, Bill Marsh. So
that's a very safe red seat. Yeah,
occupied by Bill Marsh.
That's why the Democrat Bill Marsh had to run as Republican for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like to tease him about that every now and then. Still.
For folks who don't know, Bill Marsh was, yes, a Republican state rep who went just totally off his rocker during COVID. It's like it broke his brain. And about a week into the term in 2021, so we're talking like January 2021, the Speaker of the House suddenly died. And Bill Marsh made national news by finding an obscure law that said that the infectious disease status of elected officials was public knowledge. And because they were testing every single body, whether they were symptomatic or not for COVID, that had been done. And he was positive for COVID. And we made national headlines. New Hampshire House Speaker dies of COVID.
Yeah.
And he blamed those of us who were unmasked sitting a football field away from him for giving him COVID the week before.
Of course he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of funny that I wound up taking that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't realize what seat it was.
Yeah. And I came in with a certain focus. I never desired to do this. I don't particularly like it most of the time.
That's why you're a good rep.
Well, that may be true, because I'm the only thing I'm here is to win. I want to win. I want to be successful in making changes, and I literally want to work myself out of the job. I don't want to have to do this over and over again. I just want to get it done. That's it.
It's the people who just like the power of it. They like the feeling of being in power. Those are the worst reps typically. I mean, the good ones had a mission. They want to be there to do the thing and actually achieve the outcome, not to just have fun being in the social club of the New Hampshire House or whatever the body may be, which I think some people just sort of revel in the social club almost aspect of it.
Because I'm an introvert.
Okay, yes. So you were placed on a special House committee. Tell us about the committee itself.
So the committee you're referencing is the House Special Committee on COVID Response Efficacy. So this was a committee that we had established first a caucus within the GOP. The Vaccine Injury Caucus was the name it went by. And we wanted to look into the events around COVID and take a look at what really happened. And a lot of us had some qualms about some of the things that went down during COVID and some of the actions that were taken. So we explored different avenues to try to get a committee together to do this work. One method was we had a bill. I was the one who put the bill in to establish the committee. We wound up not needing to lean on the bill because, as luck would have it, not luck, good judgment, I think, on the part of the speaker. We had some people go to the speaker and request the committee. And after looking at it, he granted the request and formed us as a standing committee to look into what happened, taking a science-based approach to the whole thing, which is really important because we wanted to ground this in reality and not have a narrative bias in this whole thing. And I certainly came into it with my biases. There's no doubt about that. I was one of the people that was nearly killed as a result of the vaccine. But I tried the best I could to kind of put that aside and say, okay, let's take a fresh look at all of this and try real hard to ground everything we're doing in the facts that we have on hand in the committee, and analyze from there. So that's how we established the committee, and that's our mission, was to look at everything state response. And it also gave us a little bit of an end to look at other things that may not have been strictly state response, like vaccines, because the state simply adopted federal guidelines. So that gave us an end to look at the federal response as well in a number of different issues. Because it all kind of, came together. It wasn't just a standalone thing, state response over here, federal response over here. It was all intermeshed.
Right. When was this committee established?
It was established, I think it was early this year, the very earliest part of this year, I think.
I think you're right. I think it was maybe sometime in the midwinter. It was what I remember it being. And when did it conclude?
We have concluded insofar as we issued the report just this past Wednesday.
Okay. So yes, I have read the majority report. Now, before we get into the majority report, I would like to talk about the minority report. So am I correct that this was an evenly split committee between Democrats and Republicans?
You're correct that it was set up that way, yes.
Right. So and for people who might be confused about why that might be, because technically New Hampshire has a Republican trifecta. We've been functioning at basically only a 1 seat or less Republican majority off and on for these 2 years. Republicans may be in control of the majority office and the speakership, but really would not have a functioning majority. All committees were evenly split throughout the last 2 years. That will not be the case moving forward into the next year because Republicans gain seats. But so yes, this was an evenly split committee with a Republican chair. All chairs were Republican.
Democrat vice chair, though.
Democrat vice chair. I forgot about that. Who was the vice chair?
Karen Ebel.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I generally find her somewhat, reasonable. But so tell me about the dynamic between the Republicans and Democrats on this committee from the start. Did it evolve? Did it change as time went on?
Sure. Well, I should preface with, there wasn't a lot of room for dynamic to happen.
Okay.
Because if you were to break it down by individual, so we did over 50 hours of hearings across, I think, about a dozen or so days. If you were to break down who was there for those, by the day, there was, I think, on average, 4.7 Republicans and 1.6 Democrats.
Yeah.
If you were to break it down even further, by each person testifying, they would have on average been testifying to less than one Democrat being present. So there wasn't a lot of participation. There wasn't a lot of dynamic there. To the degree that there were Democrats for some of the testimonies and whatnot, there were, it ran like a typical New Hampshire House committee. It wasn't vicious or anything like by any means. It was respectable, and people asked questions. Obviously, questions were heading in different directions.
I expected more pushback. I observed, I wouldn't say every, day, but of questioning, but I expected, specifically when we brought in maybe some slightly more controversial figures, I expected more questioning, and I simply didn't see, even from the very few Democrat members who were there, they didn't seem to offer any type of, I'm not saying there were no questions from them, but very few.
There wasn't a lot.
Did any Democrat members bring in people to testify?
Well, so all of the invites for testimony that were given out to people came through the chair, some of which was discussed in committee, as far as the Democrats did express some people that they would like to see.
Oh, okay.
And for the most part, they were some of the people we also wanted to see. And
such
some
as?
of the people did testify, such as members of DHHS and DHS and those are the two that come to mind.
So basically, bureaucrats, they wanted to hear from the people in the departments who were involved in the response. Obviously, yeah, that seems pretty, logical. Like you would want to know if you're doing an investigation on the COVID response, you want to talk to the people who were in charge of the COVID response in New Hampshire. They did not want to bring in any sort of outside experts on any particular field.
Not as far as I'm aware. I didn't hear about any requests for specific testimony from anyone like that.
So there were people who were brought in who were outside of the departments to testify on specific mitigation efforts, legal efforts, etc. You want to talk about who those were and anything that you found of interest?
Yes. I'm terrible at remembering everyone's name who came before us, so I'm gonna without
maybe
having
I can help. Some of them I helped get.
You wouldn't mind, but we had experts in fields including environmental engineering.
Yeah, we brought in Stephen Petty for that. And he has been in New Hampshire several times before for other mask bills. Yeah, and he is amazing. I am hoping actually he's going to be getting a role in OSHA. So that would be great. Amazing. Yeah.
We had experts in epidemiology, transmission of viruses, and
I know we brought in Dr. Martin Koldorf was one of them. Of the Great Barrington Declaration.
Talking about then they testified on a whole range of things, including the various mitigation measures that were taken in New Hampshire and in the country and across the globe.
Yeah.
We heard from more than one physician.
It's great.
Including I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name we just heard from most recently. He was a very impressive gentleman, large practice down in, I believe it was Arizona.
Yeah, hold on. I have his name. It is Jordan.
That's right, Jordan.
Hold on, I got it here.
Forgive me, I've been discussing Aristotle.
Jordan Vaughn, Dr. Jordan Vaughn. Yes.
Yes, Jordan Vaughn.
He's one of the
very impressive. We got a lot of really good information from him. Of course, Aaron Seary, he gave the longest and possibly most impactful testimony we heard. It was shocking, the information we obtained.
It was an entire day. He started, I think, at 10, and he testified with a very brief break until like 5:30 in the evening. And what I loved, and by the way, for anybody who hasn't seen it, if you go to rebuildnh.com, we have all of the testimony up there. Also, the Highwire did 3 episodes because Aaron brought in his own film crew. And so they had even significantly, frankly, better footage than just like the little New Hampshire house footage. And they did 3 episodes. So if you go to thehighwire.com and put in New Hampshire, those are going to pop up right away, those 3 episodes, and they're very worthwhile. And what I liked about it was I think that there is this thought amongst most people these days of, well, the COVID vaccine is the one that's the problem. And it was the one that wasn't tested. And that's why it was the problem. And I'm not saying, I do think that the COVID vaccine is possibly even more issues than other vaccines, but I think it is a misnomer that it was less tested than other vaccines.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that was most shocking to me. I came into this with a certain view of the COVID vaccine, having been one of those people who took it and nearly died as a consequence. Mm-hmm. I had certainly a bit of a bias when it came to the COVID vaccine, but I had no reason when I joined this committee to think that there was any problems with any other vaccines. Yeah. And what I've learned, and through a number of different testimonies, was that we so severely have been lacking in honest, good studies that we really can't make the kind of claims that we frequently hear to whether or not they are safe and whether or not they are effective and all of these other things we hear. They just haven't been reasonably studied.
Yes, yes. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I think that is the takeaway from his many, many hours of testimony, is the perverse incentive structures that have been set up, and just the severe lack of science and data to make claims that not only does the government make and the medical industry make, you're not even allowed to remotely question in any way, shape, or form. We have turned this product that has significantly less testing than any other pharmaceutical product, and we've made it into this holy grail, untouchable, that we're not allowed to say no to, when we can say no to things that have significantly more data and science behind it.
Yeah.
And so I think that was a really, truly incredible. Again, I highly recommend anybody go and watch that testimony. Any other testimony that really stuck out to you?
Oh, well, of course, I believe, had two reps testify. Rep Lekis testified. She testified for some time. It was good and impactful testimony. A lot of stuff about education. And on that note, Frank Edelblut also testified, and he put out some very interesting information regarding education.
Yeah, Frank Edelblut is the Commissioner of Education here in New Hampshire, and I've known Frank a long time, and I know how hard he fought to get the kids back in school, and I know how much resistance he was met with to be able to do that, from all levels, really, from, down to the superintendents to all the way up to, the state epidemiologist. And no one wanted to look at the facts as they were actually standing at the time.
And of course, the other rep that we had testified, I think it was the only other rep, was Rep Tim Horrigan, who provided a bit of entertainment for us. It was good.
Tim Horrigan is a Democrat state rep whose mission it seems to be, I feel like he likes to troll me specifically. He has put in a bill to repeal pretty much every single rebuild priority that's ever actually passed and become law. And even his own party will vote against all those bills. So, I mean, they're really something. He's something. So that's not surprising. He never misses an opportunity. So good for him. All right. So you wrote the majority report.
Yeah, I was a prime author for the draft. Of course, my writing style is extremely freewheeling, so I relied heavily on Rep Weary to do editing and reel me in and fix a lot of things, and he made a lot of nice additions. And then we also spent 2 days as a committee, I believe, going through the report and making edits. So okay, we all had a big input, but yeah.
Sure. I found myself, and I think I told you this, but I found myself getting emotional reading it, just because it feels like it's been such a long 5 years. I know it's only been 5 years and the wheels of justice are slow to turn. And yet it just, if I rewind 4.5 years ago even, and people like us were so maligned and ridiculed. And I mean, when I first got into the House, if we're talking like December 2020, I mean, people thought I was legitimately crazy, and just off my rocker, and what a troublemaker. And all I was saying was the basics. I think lockdowns were insane. I think that, mask mandates are insane, and I'm not going to wear one. And, things like that. We hadn't even really gotten into the vaccine stuff so much at that point. And so to fast forward, really only 4 years from that point, and to see any type of document out of, and I realize, and you may not feel that it's so impactful because it's like, oh, it's just me. I did this thing, whatever. But the fact that this is going to be the prevailing document kind of moving forward for New Hampshire, going into another emergency, going into another pandemic. I can tell you, we looked back to try to find historical references in New Hampshire government of how maybe previous pandemics were handled, and there was nothing. And more than likely because the government had no role in previous pandemics, okay? But obviously moving forward, right, they're going to continue to have some type of role. in any kind of pandemic management. And so to have this be the official sort of House position moving forward in itself just was very, it was emotional for me.
I understand that. And I felt the weight of that, as we were going through that and trying to get this just right to not be overly critical of things that we can't change going back, but to try to make sure that we understand where we erred
right
forward is huge.
So tell me whether I'm saying this correct. You can feel free to correct me, but it seemed to me that the general position, as far as what happened before, was that lockdowns were overly damaging and ineffective. Mask mandates were completely ineffective and also had negatives. The obviously vaccines should not be mandated in any way. And then as far as, moving forward, we've made a lot of positive changes to state of emergency laws in New Hampshire, and other states, frankly, haven't done anything. And if you live in another state, you really need to be looking into that, because don't let your state get away with what they did before. Okay. Because it can happen again. So we've already made a lot of really positive changes. We also have enacted a lot of medical freedom legislation. New Hampshire never did mandate the vaccine in any way, the way that we saw in other major, maybe blue cities in America, but we outlawed it. It's not possible. So I think we've already made a lot of legal changes. Tell me what before I ask that though, I do think that what this document does is to help inform, when there is another state of emergency, what the role of the legislature should be moving forward, what efforts the governor could make or should make in a similar situation moving forward. Help to inform the executive is what I really see this as helping. But there were, if I remember right, some places in the majority report that you did recommend certain changes for legislation. Do you remember what those were, and could you share that?
Sure. I won't remember all of them, I'm sure, off the top of my head, but there was a number of different ones. One of them that comes to mind is a recommended resolution, not bill, but resolution to our congressional counterparts at the federal level to take a real hard look at something called the Smith Modernization Act, which was a bill that was passed under the Obama administration that, among other things, what it really did was it took away the long-standing prohibition on utilizing State Department and federal government propaganda on U.S. soil, domestic propaganda. And if you track down both the censorship component of this, as well as the narrative propaganda component, they seem to both come back to this change that was made that allowed a significant amount of money to flow toward both censorship and propaganda of Americans. And we really, really would like to see that change undone to once more prohibit that kind of activity on U.S. soil. That's one of the big federal level things that we want to look at. Let's see. In terms of other legislative changes, I believe we made just a sort of basic recommendation that we take a look at the legislation around emergency procedures, and we consider putting in place certain requirements that any measures that are enacted as a result of emergency conditions, they need to have certain things and that come along with them. They need to have, first of all, a well and fully articulated basis for why. And that needs to include any relevant scientific evidence that would lend credibility to them. Mm-hmm. There needs to be a mechanism to challenge them. You need to be able to go before courts and say, this doesn't make sense and this is why, and come to some kind of resolution based on that. So those are recommendations for possible legislation going forward. We are looking at possible legislation to protect New Hampshire citizens when it comes to free speech on things like social media. That's going to be a tall hill to climb, but we're tossing ideas around about what may be done. Honestly, a lot of it's going to depend on what's done at the federal level.
Yep.
There's ideas regarding vaccination schedules and the way vaccinations currently work. We learned through testimony how consequential the incentive structures are when it comes to the finances around these things.
Yeah.
So when the Vaccine Act of whatever it was of 86, I believe it was passed, that granted immunity, it resulted in a significant decline in the quality of studies being done to determine whether these things are safe and effective.
Right.
Well, we don't have that exact thing happening at the state level, but we do have this vaccine association. And they do a lot of stuff, and a lot of the stuff they do is controversial, especially among people like us. But one of the most controversial things they do is they offer direct financial benefits to physicians and groups in order to achieve certain metrics as far as vaccination and whatnot. And when you set up a perverse incentive like that, you incentivize potentially bad, but certainly at a minimum, thoughtless behavior by the professionals involved, because they now have a financial incentive to do something that might not be in your best interest. So now you've got somebody trying to convince you, who you're supposed to be having a one-on-one conversation with as far as what is best for you and your family.
Right.
But they've got money coming from the government for a specific outcome. And that really
it's not true informed consent, right?
Yeah, no, it's not. And I was going to say that flies in the face of the lessons that can be taken from the Nuremberg trials around informed consent and not coercing people.
Right. Yeah. I know there is a bill being worked on to work on the incentive structure issues. And I think that's going to be really great. And I know a bill has also been put in just to repeal the Vaccine Association, which I'm all for. All right. Well, this was great. Is the majority report up on the Gen Court website yet or no?
My understanding as of, I think earlier today, was it was in the process of being uploaded to the website.
I will have it when it's up. I will have it linked in the show notes for this show so that everyone can go and read it. I highly recommend you read it. Thank you. Mike, thanks for coming on. Tell people how they can find you.
You can find me on X if you're so inclined at Mike Belcher 14. You can also find my contact information on the New Hampshire House website. So if you feel like sending me a written letter, hopefully it'll be better than the ones I usually get. But
it's called fan mail. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. You have a good day.
You too.
That is it for the Liberty Lobbyist. You can find me on X at Melissa Blasek NH or at Rebuild NH. And if you have any thoughts, questions, concerns about today's episode, you can email me director@rebuildnh.com. Until next time.